Hey there everybody, Lightroom has done it again. They have done an update and this one's a pretty major one. So the next time you open Lightroom up, it's actually going to require you to update your catalog. Now just to clarify, it's currently October 22nd. If you've not used Lightroom in the past 3 or 4 days, this is going to be something you're going to need to do. Now if you've been using Lightroom for a while, this is going to look probably pretty familiar to you, where if you're new to it, this might look really foreign. So let me walk you through it. Now when you first open Lightroom up now, it's going to show you this dialog box. It's going to have you do an update to your catalog. You can either leave the name like it was, and now you can see it's putting a V10 or version 10 after it to denote the newer version of this catalog, or you can take the time right now to rename this if you want. Now that we've got that library opened up, I'm going to go ahead and show you the first thing that they did, which probably isn't too apparent right off the bat. In the navigator, the little window up here that shows you your current selected photo, they've changed a couple little things around. It used to say fit, fill, and then it would have ratios next to that. Right now, fit and fill are under one little category here, and they've changed the ratios to percentages. Not a big deal, just a little bit different in the way that it reads. One thing that has changed though, and I'm in the library module, let's go into this picture here, and if I want to zoom in, I can now hold down Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, and it allows me to create a marquee box now by dragging my mouse or my touchpad while I hold that key down, and it zooms in on that specific area that I just told it to. Just a little handier of a way to zoom in one specific spot. Now let's go to Develop. So if I hit the letter D and we go to the Develop module, it's got something really similar in here where I can still do that marquee box by holding Command or Control. Or another way I can now zoom in this, I can hold down the Shift key, and then wherever I put my cursor, let's say it's over this spot up here, I can then hold down my mouse or click and hold on my touchpad, and if I go towards the right, it's going to zoom in on that spot. If I go to the left, it will zoom out. So just another way you can zoom in and zoom out instead of the previous ways where it was really relegated to the specific ratios or using the wheel on your mouse or the pinch method on your touchpad. Now, I'll show you one other thing that they've done here, and I think this is pretty remarkable. So let's go back into Develop module. I'm going to bring this picture that I haven't done any editing to yet in there. I'm going to go over to our global adjustments, and you'll see now that there's something called color grading in there. This actually used to be called split toning, and it was a little more limited, and this has now opened up a whole new world of possibility. If you've split toned a previous image, don't worry, it has retained all of that information and just augmented it. It is now in the color grading section with all those same adjustments. Color grading really comes from the movie industry more than anything else. Whether you know it or not, it has had massive influences on how you feel about a specific scene within a movie. Think about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where there's a very yellowish cast to quite a bit of that movie, and that was done after all of the shots in post-production to create a certain mood. Think about a lot of your favorite movies and you'll start to see these types of things playing out to really help evoke the way that the scene should feel. Now in this case, if we go into color grading, you can see that it now has color wheels for midtones, shadows, and highlights. Now of course I'm going to generally start with my basics and start getting everything dialed in there. This though would let me start to play in similar ways, not only with color, but these sliders below are for luminosity or the bright to dark value within these certain ranges. So just to give you an idea, if I go to my midtones and start pulling that slider, you can see them as midtones or pretty close to where exposure would have lied, having a little bit more range to it. If I go to shadows, I can start to darken those a little bit or lighten them. And same thing with the highlights. I have similar controls to what I would have in my basic panel, just a little more limited. Now if I go down and get these shadows a little richer, I can maybe bring in the highlights a little bit more. I can maybe bring those midtones to an area where it kind of complements there. I can do quite a bit of work just in this one panel. Where it really shines though is in adding tone to certain regions. Let me show you what I mean. Now in the shadows down here, I kind of want to cool that down a little bit. I want to add a little bit of blue. So if I come to the center of this color wheel, I can start to drag this towards the blues, and you can really see as I get further from that center, it increases the saturation towards that hue or that specific range of blue I'm choosing. So if it kind of pulls really quickly, that can be hard to judge that exact hue that you're putting in there. So if you come out a little ways and then hold down the Command key on a Mac or the Control key on a PC, it'll create a little circle where your cursor is, and then you can start to dial in the hue without adjusting the saturation. I'm going to get that dialed in to somewhere that I think looks visually really nice. Now that I've got the hue dialed in, if I let go of my cursor and push down again on my mouse one more time, you'll see a line appear, and that's now going to just keep me within that hue range to adjust the saturation to where I want it. Now, if this moves a little too quickly for you, if you hold down the Option key, that's going to be the Alt key on a PC, that's going to give you a slower movement to this, a little bit easier to dial it in. Now, I like the way that that kind of brought a little bit more cool tone to those shadows. I'm going to warm up my highlights a little bit now. So I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to pull it out just a little bit. I'm going to then hold down Command on mine because I'm using a Mac, but if it's a PC for you, you're going to hold Control. I'm going to dial in the way that I want those highlights to look, get a little more warmth in them. Then when I let off and push back down, I can just adjust my saturation by itself within that range. Midtones, they look pretty good, but I might add a little bit of green to those. A lot of the green in this image falls within those midtones. So if I richen that up a little bit, I can add a little more depth to this picture. Now, we haven't done a lot. All we've done is play with these three color wheels, and if I do the before and after tab right now, you can see already how dynamic of a difference that's having in my image. One instance you really might find this handy is a sunset shot. Oftentimes it's really hard to get that sunset and the way the shadows look exactly the way that your mind's eye saw this. So if I'm going to go to a picture, let's say this one here with a sunset in it, and it looks okay. I mean, I got some colors within there, but they're not really that vibrant. Now let's head right down to that basic panel in here, and I'm going to show you that I've actually already done quite a bit of work in here to try to bring some of that sunset back. Now I've gone through, I've played with the tonality, I've actually increased the saturation and the vibrance to kind of make some of that warm California sunset stand out. I've even used a graduated filter to darken the sky a little bit and try to bring down some of that tone and balance it with those shadows a bit more. Let me actually hit the before and after here to show you the difference in my unedited raw file versus what we've already been able to achieve with just that basic panel. Now I'm going to close up the basic panel and go down to our new color grading panel. Now my intent here is really to cool down those shadows, but I also want to warm up that sunset a little bit, which is going to be more in those midtones and those highlights. So let's start in the shadow region here. I might even, before I play with the tone, grab the luminosity slider, just drag it around a little, see what happens. Little too much when I go up into that high side of things, but when I come back down a little bit, it gives it a little more contrast, and I can still see those shadows pretty well. I like that right there. I'm going to go now to the color wheel, and like I did before, I'm going to pull it out a little bit. I'm now going to hold Command or Control, depending on if you're Mac or PC, and then dial in the tone I want down there. That blue and green kind of doesn't really look fantastic, but when I get towards this bluish purple, it starts to look pretty balanced. I like that hue, and we can always change it a bit more later, but let's increase the saturation of that a bit. Now that I've found my hue, I've let off my mouse or my touchpad, I push back down, and there's my saturation line, and it lets me stay right within there. Obviously, it can get a little too much, but I like to go beyond just a bit and then back off until it looks good, which to me is right about there, I would say. And now I'm going to do similar things with the midtone and highlights, but I'm going to go to the opposite direction. I'm going to warm those up a little bit. So let's start with those highlights. I'm going to bring those up towards, try some oranges or yellows. This was a really vibrant California sunset. Now I'm going to dial in the hue the same way, hold Command or Control. That's kind of nice right there. And let me increase that saturation a little bit. And now I'll do the same thing in those midtones. Bring it out a little, Command or Control, set my hue, and then let's bring that out just a bit. There's a little too much green in that now that I've dialed it in, so I can do the same Command or Control holds, change my hue a little and get it just where I want it. I think I like what we've gotten here, so let's just head up to the top of this panel and we can hit that before and after tab. And see, it's a pretty dynamic difference between those. To me, that color grading adjustment is a major step forward for being able to really create the subtlety that you want within your imagery. They've also just changed little things within Lightroom to make it work a little bit faster and a little bit smoother. The other major thing that they've done is if you're a Canon user and you tether to the system, they've changed it so you now have live view options within there and a lot more abilities for changing things in the camera, including focus right from Lightroom. That's about it. When it comes down to it, make sure you do this upgrade, play around, especially with that color grading tool, and see exactly what kind of nuances you can pull from your photos now. From the Lightroom Whisperer, keep on Lightrooming.